tortured and sold by her ex, until one man defied them all and loved her truly. The auction hall was built from rusted steel plates bolted into an old cargo bay, once part of a mining freighter, now fused into the station's underbelly. It smelled like burned circuits and old blood. The floor vibrated with the hum of the life support grid, and every sound echoed against the curved metal walls. Boots scuffing, hushed voices, the thin mechanical whine of the auctioneer's headset. Soraya Velcor stood on a raised platform under harsh white lights that hid nothing. Her feet were bare, skin scraped, raw from being dragged through service corridors 2 hours earlier. The collar around her throat dug into bruised flesh, tiny red indicator lights pulsing with her heartbeat. Her long white hair clung to her back, tangled and dull. Beneath her translucent mesh bodysuit, faint bioluminescent lines under her skin dimmed and brightened in time with a rush of fear in her chest. She kept her eyes forward, trying to focus on the far wall, where rust streaks traced along rivets like old blood. Her body felt numb and tense at the same time, as though every nerve was waiting to jolt her into fight or flight. But there was nowhere to go. Chains linked her wrists to the floor ring. The neural filaments sewn into the bodysuit stung her sides when she shifted her weight. Cale Dern leaned against the side rail, arms folded, half his skull gleaming chrome under the lights. He'd once been her lover, years ago on Telari Prime, where he'd hunted fugitives for syndicate bounties. Back then, he'd smiled with warmth, pressed his mouth against the sensitive skin behind her ear, promised her she was more than a prize. Now he wore the same smirk, but his voice had turned hollow, sharp. He'd sold her to settle a syndicate debt. He didn't care what happened to her, as long as his own neck stayed clear. Soraya's mind twisted in on itself, replaying the last hours, the stunned baton crackling against her ribs, the slick sound of handcuffs snapping shut, Cale whispering in her ear, "You were never mine. Just cargo." His betrayal left a raw, burning pit in her stomach, a mix of grief and rage that tangled into something sharp and cold. The auctioneer, a gaunt human with cybernetic eyes, called out bids in clipped tones. Credits flashed on holoscreens hovering above the crowd. Traders in silk tunics, syndicate lieutenants in armored vests, a scattering of private bidders watched her, their eyes crawling across her exposed skin. Each time someone shouted a higher number, a small jolt zapped the neural mesh at her hips, reminding her she was property. She heard the number 200,000 credits, spoken in a steady voice that cut across the murmuring crowd. The tone wasn't impatient or hungry. It was calm, commanding. A man stepped into the light, taller than the others, shoulders broad under a worn leather coat stained with engine grease. A thick scar slashed along his jaw, disappearing under his collar. His hair was dark, shot with gray at the temples, and his eyes, deep-set, shadowed, watched her without lust, without the empty hunger she'd seen in dozens of buyers. 200,000, he repeated, pulling out a small transfer device and tossing it to the auctioneer. Cale snorted, flicking a glance at the auctioneer, who checked the device's display. The numbers glowed bright and real. Sold. The auctioneer rasped, the word final without flourish. Soraya barely breathed as the lock on her collar hissed and clicked open. The small sting of released current faded from her spine. Her wrists fell slack in the restraints, the chains retracting into the floor. The sudden weightlessness felt unreal, like the world had shifted sideways. The man didn't step forward with outstretched hands or gentle words. He nodded once toward the stairs at the side of the platform. "Move," he said, voice low but firm. Soraya's legs nearly buckled as she took the first step. Her thoughts tumbled. What did he want? Where was he taking her? Was he worse than Cale? But part of her mind held on to one simple fact. She wasn't chained anymore. That kept her moving. Cale called out from the shadows, voice smooth and mocking. "She bites when you get too close," he said, loud enough to echo through the hall. The man didn't look back. He kept one hand on his belt, near the holster at his hip. His posture stayed loose, but ready, like he expected trouble with every step. Soraya felt the tension radiate off him, coiled and measured. They walked fast down a narrow corridor lit by flickering neon strips overhead. Pipes rattled with the station's heartbeat, the air sharp with ozone. She could barely keep up on bare feet, toes scraping against broken metal tiles. At the end of the hall, he hit a control panel, opening a battered lift door. He motioned her inside, then stepped in after her, pressing the down button. "My name is Draven Vox," he said, eyes on the floor indicator. His voice had a slight rasp, like old damage never fully healed. "I'm not here to own you. I'm getting you out." Soraya swallowed, voice raw. "Why?" He looked at her, eyes tired but focused. "Because I've seen what they do to people in those rooms. Because I don't leave anyone behind." She studied the scar along his jaw, the slight tremor in his hand resting on his thigh. She realized he wasn't as calm as he pretended. He was tense, on edge, ready for violence. The lift jolted down, lights flickering. Above them, distant voices shouted. Metal boots pounded against the floor. "Who are you?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. "Ex-military. I've been running from the syndicate for 6 years," he said. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I didn't come here for you, but I saw your file, your collar tag. They've been modifying you. If they finish, you're gone." Soraya's stomach turned cold. She'd heard rumors, women wired with new syndicate tech, turned into programmable weapons, bodies controlled by remote signal. Her skin prickled at the thought. "Why risk yourself?" she asked. Draven's eyes went distant, jaw clenching. "Because I didn't risk myself last time, and someone paid the price." The lift slammed to a stop. He drew his pistol, a battered slug thrower patched with old weld lines. He cracked the door open, scanning the dim hangar bay beyond. "Stay close," he said. She nodded, swallowing the ache in her throat. She didn't trust him, but she didn't want to die chained in the auction hall. That choice was simple. The hangar smelled like fuel and scorched metal. Cargo haulers trundled past on magnet treads, loading crates stamped with syndicate glyphs. Guards patrolled in loose pairs, rifles slung, eyes half alert. Draven moved low between stacks of crates, glancing back every few seconds to make sure she followed. They almost made it to the far bay door before 2 guards spotted them. Shouts broke out, rifles raised. Draven fired twice, both guards dropping with clean shots to the chest. He grabbed her arm, pulling her through a side door just as alarms began to blare overhead. The corridor beyond was dark, walls dripping with condensation. At the far end, an old freighter crouched on landing struts, its hull patched with mismatched plates of scavenged steel. Draven hit a code on the hatch. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic groan. "Go," he said. Soraya ran, heart pounding, so hard her vision blurred. She stumbled up the ramp, catching herself on the edge. Draven followed, punching the hatch control as the first security team rounded the corner. Bullets sparked against the ramp as the hatch sealed shut. Inside, the ship smelled of oil and stale air. Draven threw himself into the pilot's seat, hands moving fast over cracked control panels. Warning lights flashed red and orange as the engines coughed, then roared to life. "Hold on," he said. Soraya clutched the back of his chair as the freighter lurched upward, scraping against the bay wall. Outside, muzzle flashes burst in bright pops of light. Alarms howled across the station. The freighter rolled hard left, gravity cutting out for half a second, then slammed back on as Draven punched the throttle. She fell against the bulkhead, ribs aching. Draven cursed under his breath, voice steady despite the chaos. "They'll launch pursuit drones," he said. "Then what?" she asked, breath ragged. He glanced back at her, eyes dark and flat. "Then we run until they can't follow." The ship tore free of the station, the starfield opening wide in the viewport. Soraya sagged against the wall, body shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. The collars still hung around her throat, a reminder of how close she'd come to disappearing into the syndicate's machines. She watched Draven as he guided the freighter through the debris field around the station, his jaw tight, hands sure. Whatever his reasons, he'd save her life. For now, that was enough. Her thoughts burned with fear, anger, and something harder, resolve. She would never be chained again. Not by Kale. Not by anyone. Draven's voice broke the silence, low and certain. "We'll find a way to keep them off us," he said. "You're safe now." She didn't believe in safe. Not yet. But in the hum of the engines and the steady rise of distance between her and the auction hall, she let herself breathe. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled past in long, bright lines, the dark between them wide and waiting. The ship rattled as Draven guided it through a cloud of broken satellite shards drifting just beyond the station's defense grid. Alarms on the console blared, warning of hull breaches that never came. Soraya gripped the back of the pilot's chair, muscles tight, eyes locked on the viewport where streaks of red tracer rounds flashed past the hull. Draven's jaw was rigid, sweat shining on his temple as he kept the freighter angled through the debris. His fingers danced across old control panels, muttering curse after curse at the engine readouts. "They launched drones," he said. "3 fast attack models. If they lock a missile, we're dust." Soraya swallowed, voice hoarse. "Can't you outrun them?" "Not in this crate," he said. The ship lurched again, engines screaming under the strain. He slammed the throttle forward, muttering as fuel lines flickered into the red on the display. She moved beside him, legs shaking but steady. "I can help," she said, surprising even herself with the sharp edge in her voice. "I'm not dead weight." He flicked a quick look at her, eyes dark but focused. "You any good with hull turrets?" "I've never fired one," she said, steady. "But if you show me the controls, I'll figure it out." Draven grunted. "Port gun. Ladder there." He pointed to a narrow crawlway on the left side of the cockpit. "Watch your head." Soraya moved, ignoring the ache in her ribs, the sticky feeling of half-dried blood on her ankle where the mesh suit had dug into her skin. The crawlway smelled like rust and stale air. She climbed fast, pushing past dangling wires that sparked against the metal wall. The gun turret was small, barely more than a metal seat and twin grips attached to an old targeting screen. She strapped herself in, breathing fast as the turret whirred to life. A small green display showed 3 blinking dots moving fast toward their position. "Targeting linked." Draven's voice crackled over the intercom. "Don't waste rounds. Wait until you have a lock." Soraya clenched her jaw, eyes scanning the void outside. The drones were sleek, almost organic in shape, black holes glinting with syndicate glyphs. They moved in quick darting patterns, cutting across the starfield like knives. She felt a chill spread across her skin, not from fear, but from the old training Kale had forced on her, teaching her to read subtle shifts in body language, to track weakness, to anticipate violence. This wasn't the same, but the focus, the narrow tunnel vision, felt familiar. Her finger hovered over the trigger as one drone darted across her crosshairs. She waited, breath held, heart pounding. Then she fired. The turret shuddered, recoil jolting her shoulder. The first burst missed, tracers sparking harmlessly past the drone. The second burst caught the drone's wing. It spun, trailing fluid and debris, but didn't stop. "Again," Draven said, voice calm. She tracked the drone, waiting for the moment it banked back toward them. She fired a long burst this time, gritting her teeth as the rounds punched through the drone's hull. It exploded in a bloom of white fire, bits of black metal scattering into the dark. "One down," Draven called. Soraya swallowed bile as the turret display flashed bright red. Another drone locking onto them from the starboard side. She swung the gun, cursing as the drone fired a streak of pulse rounds that rattled against their hull. "Got it," she hissed, squeezing the trigger. The gun whined, tracers cutting a path across the drone's nose. It veered up, narrowly missing them, but didn't explode. Her hands slipped on the grips, sweat dripping down her forearms. "Port shields down to 10%, Draven barked. "Take it out now." Soraya fired again, pulse steady, ignoring the fear crawling up her spine. The rounds punched through the drone's center, shattering its power core. It tore apart, flaming debris scattering across the viewport. The last drone pulled back, cutting a wide arc. Draven threw the ship into a spin, sending Soraya hard against the straps. "Get out of the turret," he ordered. "We're jumping." She unbuckled, dropping to the floor. Her legs buckled under her, every muscle screaming in protest. She scrambled down the ladder, heart hammering. Draven was already tapping commands into the NAV console, voice low and tense. Jump drive's half-cooked. Might blow us apart. No choice. Soraya gripped the co-pilot's seat, her voice raw. Do it. He glanced at her, eyes searching hers for a fraction of a second. Then he hit the drive switch. The ship shuddered, metal groaning as the starfield outside smeared into bright lines. The hum of the engines turned into a low, throbbing roar that rattled the deck plates under their feet. Soraya clenched her fists, waiting for the explosion she half expected. It didn't come. The roar faded. The stars outside slowed, resolving into quiet pinpricks of light. The screens flickered, showing no pursuit. For the first time in what felt like hours, the ship was still. Draven sagged back in the pilot's chair, breathing hard. His hands trembled slightly on the controls. Soraya felt her own breath hitch in her throat. Relief, shock, and raw exhaustion crashed over her in a single wave. Draven rubbed a hand over his face. We're clear. For now. She nodded, sinking into the co-pilot's seat, muscles loose with sudden fatigue. Where are we? He glanced at the NAV readout, voice flat. Outside, Syndicate-controlled space. Old mining belt, no active stations. We've got maybe an hour before they trace the jump path. Soraya swallowed, fingers digging into the seat's worn fabric. Why did you really do this? You could have left me there. Save yourself the risk. Draven didn't answer right away. He stared at the controls, jaw working. Then he spoke, voice low. I was supposed to extract data from the auction's buyer records. Get a list of syndicate contracts. But I saw your file. I saw what they planned. I couldn't leave you. She studied him, the scar, the deep shadows under his eyes. He looked tired, older than the records Kale had shown her once. But there was a steadiness there that caught at something in her chest. What did they plan? She asked. Draven shook his head. Syndicate's running a new tech line. Augments. Remote trigger pheromone control. Neural overlays. They were going to turn you into a prototype. A weapon they could sell to the highest bidder. Soraya felt the world tilt slightly under her. Her stomach rolled with nausea. I wasn't enough as a toy, she said, voice flat. Draven's voice hardened. No one deserves that. Silence settled over them, broken only by the faint hum of the damaged engines. Soraya rubbed her wrists where the chains had been, mind spinning. Memories of Kale's smirk, the look in his eyes as he sold her, the feel of the collar digging into her skin. Rage pulsed hot in her chest. Kale won't stop, she said. He'll track us. He always tracks what he thinks he owns. Draven nodded slowly. I know. Soraya turned to face him, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Then we don't run. We fight. We make sure he can't touch me again. Draven's mouth tightened. His eyes locked on hers, and in that instant, she saw the hint of something that wasn't pity or softness, but respect. All right, he said. But first, we need fuel, food, and a place to lay low. Then we take the fight back to him. Soraya leaned back in the chair, breath coming slow, controlled. For the first time since Kale had dragged her out of the cell block, she felt the faint glow of something like hope in her chest. She would not be owned again, and Kale would learn what it meant to break the wrong person. The freighter's engines rumbled low as Draven guided it through the dark. Outside the viewport, scattered rocks drifted in slow orbits, chunks of old mining debris left over from wars fought before either of them was born. The starfield was empty, no syndicate signals on the scanners, but Soraya kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting Kale's voice to crackle through the comm or a drone to appear on the screens. Draven set the ship on a gentle drift course, letting the systems cool. He shut down everything non-essential, darkening the cabin lights until only the faint glow of the console illuminated the scarred lines of his face. Soraya shifted in the co-pilot's chair, feeling every bruise, every raw scrape under the mesh suit. Her voice came out low, tight. Where are we going to hide? Old supply depot on Karnas, 4, Draven said. Abandoned after the syndicate pulled out of the belt. I know a trader there who won't ask questions. Soraya frowned. You trust him? Draven shook his head once. I don't trust anyone out here. But he trades fuel for scrap. No syndicate ties. It's a start. She let out a slow breath, eyes dropping to her hands in her lap. The collar still hung loose around her neck. She reached up, fingers brushing the metal band. Draven's voice was softer. You want me to cut it off? She hesitated, feeling the faint hum of embedded circuits under her fingertips. No, she said. Not yet. Kale might be able to trace the signal. I want to know when he's close. Draven nodded, respect in a quiet way. He looked at her. Outside, the stars shifted as the ship drifted through a thin cloud of dust. Faint sparks flickered across the hull, small static charges from the debris. Soraya spoke again, voice steady but low. Why did you leave the military? Draven's eyes stayed on the console, jaw tightening. He took a long breath before answering. They ordered me to clear out a mining colony, he said. Intel said syndicate forces were hiding there. Turned out, it was a civilian settlement. They wanted no witnesses. I refused the order. Got branded a deserter, price on my head. Been running ever since. Soraya felt something loosen in her chest. She'd wondered why he'd saved her, why he hadn't sold her back to Kale for more credits. Now she knew. He wasn't a hero. He was someone who'd seen enough blood to make him walk away from every order, every easy choice. Do you think Kale will chase us himself? She asked. Draven glanced at her, a flicker of something cold passing through his eyes. Yes, he wants you. He'll come himself. Soraya swallowed hard. The memory of Kale's hand gripping her jaw, the lazy smile when he told the auctioneer to let her go, was still raw in her mind. Part of her still felt the phantom touch of his fingers at her throat. What does he really want? She asked, almost to herself. Draven's voice was flat. Kale wants what he can't control. He thinks he owns you. That makes you his trophy, his unfinished game. She nodded slowly. That part she understood. She learned early that men like Kale only cared about the thrill of breaking something bright and alive. Draven changed course, guiding the ship through a narrow band of drifting or chunks. The hull shuddered with small impacts, but the screen stayed clear. He knew about the syndicate's plan. Soraya murmured, mind turning over pieces that didn't fit. He must have known what they'd do to me once they took me off the auction floor. Draven nodded. That's why he sold you. He's syndicate affiliated now. Part of his payout was you. He let them finish the work on your collar, lace you with new neural overlays. They'd turn you into a controlled asset, keep you docile, weaponize your pheromone emissions. Soraya clenched her fists until her nails dug into her palms. They'd turn me into a living tool, a machine that obeys. Yeah, Draven said, voice hard. But they didn't finish. She looked at him, studying the scar on his jaw, the lines at the corners of his eyes. Why didn't you leave me there and run? He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he sighed, voice rough. Because when I saw you on that platform, you looked the way I felt when I left the military. Alone, used, disposable. I couldn't let that stand. Silence fell between them, not soft but heavy, pulsing with old wounds neither of them had words to close. The console chimed. Draven checked the display. Depot coming up, he said. Sit tight. The freighter angled toward a looming gray rock. At first it looked like an asteroid, until faint lights flickered along its surface, showing old docking ports, rusted antenna arrays, and faded paint peeling from old syndicate logos. As they approached, Soraya's skin prickled. I feel something, she said, voice tense. Draven glanced at her, wary. What do you mean? She swallowed. I don't know. It's like static in my head. A pulse. I never felt this before they implanted the collar. Draven gripped the throttle, slowing the ship. They might have wired you to detect certain signals. A tracker net? Maybe an early warning system. Can you tell where it's coming from? Soraya closed her eyes, focusing on the strange thrum at the base of her skull. It's faint, but below us, near the station. Good enough, Draven said. He turned the ship, scanning the rock's surface. Hang on. He swung them around the asteroid, bringing them in on a dark docking ring half hidden behind an old mining array. The station's beacon blinked weakly, broadcasting a low-energy signal. He powered the engines down to minimum and opened the comm channel. This is the freighter Talon's Edge, requesting emergency dock, he said, voice even. A crackling voice replied, rough and static-filled. State your business. Fuel trade, Draven said. We can pay. Long pause. Then the voice came again, suspicious. Docking Bay 3. Keep your weapons holstered. Draven cut the comm. He glanced at Soraya. We go in together. Stay close. Don't make sudden moves. If they sniff syndicate tech on you, they'll panic. Soraya nodded. She felt the pulse in her head fade as they approached the docking clamps. Part of her wanted to rip the collar off and toss it into the void, but the thought of Kale's smile if he found her again kept her hand still. The ship docked with a dull clang. Draven stood, sliding his pistol into the holster at his hip, leaving the strap unbuckled. He glanced at her, voice soft but firm. You ready? She drew in a breath, feeling the burn of old bruises and new rage in every bone. I'm ready. The ramp lowered. Warm, stale air rushed up into the hold, carrying the smell of rust and sweat and old machinery. Draven stepped out first, boots hitting the metal deck with a hollow thud. Soraya followed, eyes scanning the dim corridor beyond. 3 dock guards waited, rifles held low but ready. Behind them, the shadows of the station stretched into narrow corridors lit by flickering yellow strips. A short man in a grease-stained tunic stepped forward. His eyes flicked over Soraya, lingered a second too long on the collar, then snapped to Draven. Don't bring trouble here, he said, voice flat. Just need fuel and parts, Draven said. Then we're gone. The man grunted. 2 hours. Any longer, we charge extra. No fights. No syndicate bullshit. Understood, Draven said. They moved past the guards, deeper into the station. Soraya felt the eyes on her, saw the way people shrank back from Draven's scar, the loose but lethal way he carried himself. She kept her head up, heart hammering, every sense stretched thin. Kill was out there, somewhere. She knew he'd come, and when he did, she would not run. Not this time. The corridor twisted through the heart of the old depot, walls streaked with rust and patched with salvage plates from a dozen forgotten ships. The air was thick with grease and stale sweat, humming with the low thrum of hidden generators. Pipes rattled above their heads, dripping condensation onto cracked floor panels. Draven walked with practiced caution, scanning every shadow, his hand close to his holster, but never drawing, head tilted slightly to listen for the click of boots or the hiss of a concealed weapon powering up. Soraya followed, her heart beating fast but steady. Every footstep echoed in her head. She was used to being watched, measured, valued for the shape of her body or the price of her collar. Here, the stares she caught were wary, suspicious, dismissive. None of them recognized her face or the strange glow that flickered under her skin when fear spiked. That suited her fine. Ahead, the corridor widened into an open bay crowded with stalls, tables, and scuffed cargo crates stacked high. Men and women in patched jumpsuits argued over spare parts, passing credits in quick handshakes. A pair of mechanics bickered over a half-disassembled power conduit, the argument crackling over the whine of old welders. Draven slowed, eyes scanning. Stay close, he murmured. Soraya nodded. Her legs ached with each step. She could still feel the weight of the chains from the auction hall, the sting of the neural mesh burning into her hips when the bids climbed higher. She blinked, clearing the memory. This place was different. She was different now. A tall man with a bushy gray beard and one augmented eye lifted a hand as they approached. He wore a threadbare engineer's coat, sleeves rolled up to reveal mechanical tendons in his forearms. Draven Vox, he said, voice rough but steady. Didn't expect you back so soon. Thought the syndicate would have pinned your hide to a bulkhead by now. Good to see you too, Keller, Draven said. He didn't smile, but his shoulders eased slightly. We need fuel and 2 jump capacitors. Ship's old. Parts are older. Keller snorted. Aren't they all? He glanced at Soraya, brow furrowing. And her. Draven's jaw tightened. None of your business. Keller shrugged. Fine by me. Credits first. Draven pulled a battered credit stick from his jacket, tossing it across the table. 2 hours, like always. No syndicate ears in here, right? Not unless you drag him in behind you. Keller said, pocketing the stick. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Word is, Cale Dern's been making rounds. Big payout for anyone who finds you. Soraya's stomach twisted, skin crawling. She kept her face still, but inside, the thought of Cale, his golden skin, the lazy confidence, the tiny metal port behind his ear that pulsed when he was angry, burned like acid. Draven's eyes stayed locked on Keller's. We keep moving. Tell your people to keep quiet. I'm not your messenger, Keller grumbled, but he jerked his chin at one of the mechanics, signaling him toward Draven's ship. We'll get your fuel. 2 hours. No fights, Vox. You know the rules. Yeah, Draven said, turning away. Soraya fell and stepped beside him, voice low. You know him from before? Fought with him, Draven said. He was an engineer on the front lines when I walked away. Stayed alive by selling parts to whoever paid. He hates the syndicate, but he loves credits more. Soraya hesitated. Do you trust him? Draven glanced at her, eyes tired. Trust? No, but he won't sell us out while he thinks there's more credits to bleed from me. She nodded, chewing on the inside of her cheek. Her thoughts spun, connecting half-remembered details Cale had whispered to her when they were still lovers. Cale bragging about hidden listening posts, syndicate satellites buried in asteroid fields, coded channels they used to track rogue ships. Cale might already know we're here, she murmured. The collar, they said they could use it to trigger compliance, but maybe it also sends out a beacon. Draven's jaw clenched. You feel anything now? That pulse in your head. She closed her eyes, focusing. The faint static she'd felt before was gone. The collar was quiet, humming only with the low vibration of old circuits. Nothing, she said. Good, Draven muttered. We keep moving fast. 2 hours and we're gone. They ducked into a side corridor, away from the crowded market stalls. The hallway was narrow, lined with old storage lockers. Draven stopped at one, pried it open, and rummaged through the dust and metal scrap inside. He pulled out a small toolkit, flipping it open on a crate. Soraya watched him, voice tight. What are you doing? Need to check the collar, he said. I've seen syndicate mods before. They like to hide backup triggers in the casing. He gestured for her to sit. She did, every muscle tense as he examined the collar. His fingers were rough, warm, careful as he pried back a panel and peered at the tiny embedded chips. It's dirty work, he muttered, brow furrowed. But I think I can disable the transmitter. You sure you want to quiet? We might lose our warning signal if Cale comes close. Soraya swallowed. Her throat felt raw, voice rough. Do it, she whispered. I don't want him tracking me anymore. Draven nodded. Hold still. His hands moved fast, precise. Tiny sparks crackled as he cut a filament, the faint whine of the collar's power coil fading into silence. Soraya felt the hum in her skull vanish, leaving only her heartbeat thudding in her ears. It's off, he said, stepping back. Signal's dead, but if he finds us, we won't know until he's right on top of us. I don't care, she said. I don't want to be his bait anymore. Draven nodded, respect flashing in his eyes. He packed the tools away, voice quiet. You did good in the turret. Save us both. I know you didn't ask for this fight, but you're in it now. I won't leave you behind. Soraya felt her eyes sting, but she blinked the burn away, jaw tight. I'm not the same girl he sold, she said. I won't let him own me again. Draven opened his mouth to speak, but a clatter down the hallway cut him off. He grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a stack of crates. 2 men in syndicate-pattern combat vests stomped past, rifles slung low. One of them murmured into a comm, the faint hiss of static crackling back in reply. Soraya's pulse thudded in her throat. Draven's grip tightened on her wrist. She could feel the tension in his fingers, the slight tremor of restraint. He didn't breathe until the footsteps faded. They're here, he breathed. Cale, she asked, voice shaking. Or his dogs, Draven said. Either way, we're out of time. He tugged her out from behind the crates, leading her fast down the corridor. Ahead, the docking bay door glowed with warning lights. Keller stood by the entry panel, cursing under his breath as he tried to override the security lockout. They shut me out, Keller spat as Draven approached. Your friends tripped the alarm. Whole place is sealing down. How many? Draven demanded. Keller glanced back, voice low. Half a dozen syndicate enforcers, maybe more. They're looking for someone, and they're not subtle. Draven's eyes met Soraya's. "This ends here," he said. Soraya felt something cold and steady rise in her chest. She nodded once. "Then let's make sure it ends with him bleeding." Draven grinned, the expression sharp and hungry. "Good," he said, drawing his pistol. "You stay behind me. If we get separated, find cover, wait for my signal." Soraya's breath came fast, but her hands didn't shake. She reached into the crate beside her, pulling out a battered shock baton. "I won't hide," she said. "Not this time." Draven's grin widened, Scar pulling tight. "All right, then let's hunt." They moved toward the docking bay, stepped silent on the metal floor, weapons ready. Behind them, the station lights flickered, alarms blaring as the syndicate sweep tightened its net. Kale was here. She could feel it in her bones. And when he found her, she'd be ready. The hallway stank of hot wiring and gun oil. Lights flickered overhead as Draven and Soraya moved past Keller, slipping into the dark corridor beyond the docking bay. Metal screeched somewhere deeper in the station, the echo rising and falling like a wounded animal. Soraya gripped the shock baton so tight her knuckles burned, sweat dripping into the cuts on her palms. Draven kept low, gun raised, eyes scanning every shadow. His voice was low and steady. "They'll try to flush us into the main hall. Don't let them herd you." Soraya swallowed, adrenaline buzzing under her skin. "I remember Kale bragging," she whispered. "He said if someone runs, you cut off their exits and drive them into a kill box." "Yeah," Draven muttered. Classic syndicate play. Ahead, the corridor split in 3 directions. A pair of syndicate enforcers stepped out from the right passage, rifles raised, red lights glowing on the barrel tips. Draven didn't hesitate. He fired twice, the shots echoing like hammer strikes. One enforcer dropped instantly. The second staggered, clutching his shoulder before Draven's third shot hit him square in the throat. Soraya moved beside him, heart pounding. She felt the crackle of a faint pulse in the back of her skull, a ghost of the old collar hum. She bit her lip, focusing on the path ahead. "Down that middle corridor," Draven said, nodding. "There's a maintenance lift. Leads to the old fuel cells. Maybe we can circle back to the ship before they lock us out." Soraya nodded, stepping over the dead syndicate men, ignoring the blood splattered across the walls. She didn't flinch, didn't stop. Something in her had broken back in the auction hall. The fear was still there, but it had nowhere to go but forward. As they moved, Draven spoke, voice quick. "They're not hunting me. They're hunting you. You're the priority." "I know," she said. Her voice was flat, hard. "Kale doesn't care about the ship or you. He wants me in chains. He wants to look me in the eye when he clips the collar back on." Draven glanced at her, something dark flickering in his gaze. "That won't happen," he said. They reached the lift. Draven slammed the call button. A grinding noise echoed above as the old cab descended. A syndicate shout came from the far end of the hall. Pulse rifle shots hissed past them, burning holes into the wall. Draven fired blind down the corridor, then shoved Soraya into the lift as the doors rattled open. They tumbled inside. Draven slammed the closed switch. The door slid shut just as another pulse shot splashed against the metal, leaving a smoking scar inches from Soraya's face. The lift rattled downward, old motors screeching. Draven leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Kel won't stop," he said, voice low. "He wants you because you're valuable. And because you're his mark. If he can't have you, he'll kill you just to prove he owns your ending." Soraya's jaw clenched. "He was charming once," she whispered. "Told me I was powerful, dangerous, beautiful. He said he wanted to protect me from the syndicate. Then he sold me the first chance he got." "Predators wear pretty masks," Draven muttered. "I've seen his type 1,000 times." The lift shuddered to a stop. The doors hissed open on a long, dim maintenance tunnel. Steam drifted from old vents. Shadows moved across the far wall. More syndicate enforcers. Draven grabbed her wrist, pulling her out. "Come on." They ran, boots slamming against the grated floor. Soraya could hear her own heartbeat louder than the gunfire behind them. Draven ducked into a side alcove, gun raised. Syndicate boots thundered past, two enforcers with flashlights sweeping the main corridor. Soraya pressed close to the wall, breathing shallow. The shock baton buzzed faintly in her grip, its charge ready. Draven whispered, "I need you to listen. I've got one frag grenade left. We can take the corridor, double back, get to the ship. But they'll be ready. Kale knows how I think." Soraya met his eyes. Then we stopped thinking like him. Draven tilted his head. "Ow! He expects you to protect me," she said. "He expects me to hide. That's how he wants it," cornered Prey. "But I'm not Prey anymore." Draven studied her, eyes searching. Then he nodded. "You want to draw him out?" "Yes," she said, voice steady. "I want to end this. Now." Draven pulled the grenade from his belt, checked the pin. "Your call," he said. Soraya took a slow breath. Kale always liked a stage. "Give him one." They moved together, stepping into the corridor as the two enforcers turned back. Draven tossed the grenade. The explosion roared, dust and metal shards ripping through the hallway. Soraya charged forward, shock baton raised, catching the first enforcer in the chest before he could recover. The crackle of electricity filled the air as he dropped, screaming. Draven shot the second enforcer point blank, then slammed the smoking rifle barrel against the wall to clear the chamber. Behind them, more syndicate voices echoed, shouting over the alarm. Soraya knelt by the dying enforcer, grabbing his comm. Her fingers worked fast, adjusting the frequency. She spoke in a mic, voice cold and even. "Kale, I know you're listening. Come give me yourself. Or are you still too much of a coward to finish what you started?" Silence crackled back, then a smooth voice cut through. "Kale." Warm, mocking, edged with hunger. "Little star," he purred. "Always had a mouth on you. Don't worry. I'm coming. And when I find you, you'll beg me to put the collar back on." Soraya dropped the comm, crushing it under her boot. "He's coming," she said. Draven grinned, eyes cold. "Good. Let's kill him." They moved back down the smoking corridor, every step measured. Ahead, the alarm lights strobed red across the walls. Soraya felt the hum of something new in her chest. Not the neural pulse of the collar, but a hot, sharp fury that steadied her hands and quieted the trembling in her legs. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. The corridor throbbed with the pulse of red alarm lights. Smoke drifted through the air, carrying the bitter stench of burned insulation. Soraya wiped blood from her cheek with the back of her hand, fingers steady despite the pounding in her skull. Every step echoed against the metal floor as she and Draven moved forward, weapons ready. They heard Kale's voice before they saw him. A low, lazy drawl echoing through the comm speakers rigged across the station walls. "Don't think you're clever, Soraya. I taught you every trick you know. You can't surprise me." Draven kept moving, gun raised, eyes scanning every doorway. "He's trying to rattle you," he murmured. Soraya's jaw clenched. "It won't work," she said, voice raw. "He wants me scared. Wants me to crawl." Draven nodded. "Let him think it worked." They reached the maintenance deck, an open, dimly lit chamber ringed with walkways and broken machinery. Steam hissed from cracked pipes overhead, casting shifting shadows across the floor. In the center, Kale stood with two enforcers flanking him. He wore a gleaming black combat coat, gold skin gleaming in the emergency lights, half a skull chrome and pulsing faintly with red signal lines. His mouth curved into a smile as he saw her, white teeth bright against the smoke. "Little star," he said, voice smooth, playful. "You made me come all this way. I should be angry." He tilted his head, mechanical ports along his temple blinking. "But you look beautiful when you fight." Soraya stepped forward, shock baton humming in her grip. "I'm not yours anymore," she said. Kale chuckled, glancing at Draven. "You think this old soldier can save you? You think you're special to him? You're just another broken thing he'll throw away." Draven didn't flinch. "Try me," he said. Kale raised a hand, flicking his fingers. The two enforcers raised their rifles, but Draven was faster. His pistol barked twice. One enforcer spun, chest torn open. The second fired, pulse round sizzling past Draven's shoulder. Soraya lunged, shock baton jabbing into the man's side. Electricity crackled, and he dropped, body jerking as he convulsed. Kale didn't move. His smile widened, chrome skull gleaming. You never understood, he murmured. You think you're free, Soraya. But you're not. You were bred for this, bought, sold, always someone else's property. You don't get to decide what you are. Soraya felt her chest tighten. For an instant, she saw herself on the auction platform again, naked, collared, watched by dozens of hungry eyes. She smelled the burned metal of the stunned Batten Kale had pressed against her ribs the day he dragged her to the syndicate ship. Then the moment shattered. Her fingers tightened on the baton, voice shaking with rage. You don't get to decide for me anymore, she said. Kale moved fast, hands snapping to his sidearm. Soraya charged, swinging the baton. The weapon cracked against his wrist just as he drew. The gun skittered across the floor. Kale's grin vanished, replaced by a snarl. He grabbed her throat with his cybernetic hand, fingers squeezing. She gagged, shock baton dropping from numb fingers. Kale leaned close, breath hot against her ear. You're mine, he hissed. A gunshot exploded beside her. Kale's shoulder jerked back, chrome shattering under the impact. Draven moved in, pistol smoking, but Kale swung Soraya like a shield, shoving her into Draven's chest. Draven caught her, grunting as Kale lunged for the dropped rifle. Soraya gasped, throat burning, vision swimming. She felt Draven push her gently aside, stepping between her and Kale. Run, Draven snapped, gun raised. She didn't. She snatched up the shock baton, ignoring the pain lancing through her neck. Kale fired at Draven, but Draven dove behind a stack of crates, shots sparking off metal. Soraya circled, keeping low, heart thudding in her chest. Kale turned toward her, rifle raised. Stay down, little star, he called, voice cold. She didn't hesitate. She lunged in low, swinging the baton at the rifle's barrel. Sparks flew as metal struck metal, knocking the gun aside just as Kale squeezed the trigger. The shot seared past her ear, so close she smelled her own hair burning. Kale backhanded her, sending her sprawling across the deck. Pain flashed white in her skull. She rolled, gasping, grabbing the baton again. Kale loomed over her, rifle aimed at her head. Always so stubborn, he sneered. A shot rang out. Kale jerked, blood blooming across his golden chest. Draven fired again, hitting him in the chrome side of his skull. Kale staggered, metal plating sparking, but he didn't fall. Finish it, Draven shouted. Soraya surged up, driving the baton into the smoking crack in Kale's skull. Electricity arced through metal and flesh. Kale screamed, body convulsing, fingers clutching at her arms. His chrome skull split with a sharp crack, spraying wires and hot fluid across her face. He tried to speak, mouth twitching, but no words came out. His body jerked once more, then went limp, collapsing onto the deck. Silence crashed down like a hammer. Draven lowered his gun, breathing hard, sweat dripping from his chin. Soraya knelt beside Kale's corpse, chest heaving. She watched the lights in his chrome skull flicker and die, felt the rage and fear drain out of her until only raw emptiness remained. Draven touched her shoulder, voice quiet. It's done, he said. Soraya swallowed, looking up at him. Her throat burned where Kale's hand had gripped her. I thought I'd feel something, she whispered. Relief. Victory. But it's just gone. Draven nodded, helping her to her feet. It'll come, he said. You survived. That's enough for now. She leaned into him, letting the warmth of his chest steady her. Around them, the station lights flickered, the alarms fading into quiet. Kale was dead. The nightmare was over. And for the first time in years, Soraya felt the tight collar around her soul loosen, just enough to let her breathe. The station fell silent. The alarms cut off one by one, replaced by the low hum of failing generators. Smoke drifted from the ruined corridor where Kale lay dead, his golden skin streaked with dark blood. Half his chrome skull split open, flickering with dying sparks. Soraya stood over him, breathing slow and ragged, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Draven checked Kale's body, rifle raised, then glanced at her, voice low. He's gone, he said. He can't hurt you anymore. Soraya nodded, swallowing the raw ache in her throat. She wiped a smear of blood from her cheek, hand steady despite the tremor running through her legs. For years, Kale had been the shadow behind every door, the voice whispering in her nightmares, the hands gripping her throat in every dark dream. Now he was nothing but a ruined corpse on the metal floor. Ship's still fueled, Draven said. We can leave. Now, Soraya looked around the chamber, taking in the dead enforcers, the twisted wreckage of pipes, and scorched metal walls. A part of her wanted to stay, burn this place down, scatter the Syndicate's ashes into space. But another part, the part Kale had never broken, whispered one clear truth. She was free now. Free to leave, to breathe, to choose. She met Draven's eyes, voice steady. Let's go. They moved quickly through the dark halls, boots splashing through puddles of coolant and blood. The few remaining Syndicate grunts scattered at the sight of Kale's blood on Soraya's arms and Draven's cold glare. They reached the docking bay without resistance. Keller was waiting, eyes wide, face pale. You killed him, Keller breathed, looking between them. Kale, he had Syndicate backing. There'll be a price on both your heads now. Draven holstered his pistol. Doesn't matter, he said. We're done running. Soraya stepped past Keller, voice calm. Tell the Syndicate whatever you want. We won't be here when they come. Keller swallowed, nodding quickly. Yeah, sure. I didn't see anything. They climbed the ramp into the freighter, sealing the hatch behind them. The ship hummed under Soraya's feet, systems coming online as Draven powered up the engines. He settled into the pilot's seat, hands moving across cracked screens and flickering switches. Soraya sank into the co-pilot's chair, feeling the bruises across her ribs, the raw burn on her throat where Kale's hand had gripped tight. She touched the collar, now just a dead ring of metal. Draven glanced at her, eyebrow raised. Want to cut it off, he asked. Soraya took a long breath, then nodded. Yes, she said softly. Draven pulled out his combat knife, the blade scarred and stained. He slid the edge under the collar, careful not to nick her skin. The metal creaked, then popped free, dropping to the floor with a hollow clang. Soraya touched her throat, the skin raw and sensitive. Feels light, she whispered. Draven nodded. Good. He tossed the collar aside, voice low. You're not anyone's property now. Soraya met his eyes, saw the tired lines, the old pain still lurking behind them. She reached out, resting her fingers against the scar on his jaw. You saved me, she said. Draven let out a slow breath. I didn't plan on this, he admitted. I just couldn't let them take you. She smiled, small and real. I know, she said. That's why I trust you. Draven swallowed, eyes softening. We can keep running, he said. Find someplace quiet, off the Syndicate grid. Disappear for good. Soraya shook her head. I don't want to run anymore, she said. Kale's dead. The collar's gone. I want to build something. I want to choose who I am. Draven studied her, then nodded. All right, he said. Wherever you go, I go too. Soraya leaned back, closing her eyes as the ship rumbled beneath them. Draven guided the freighter away from the station, engines flaring bright. The stars outside wheeled past in slow arcs, the debris field falling away behind them. Soraya felt every breath settle into her bones, every heartbeat steady. The fear was still there, the memory of Kale's grip, the pain of every moment spent chained. But they were fading, washed clean by the roar of the engines and the warmth of Draven's presence beside her. You ever wanted to see the Ryla system? Draven asked, voice lighter. Soraya opened her eyes, smiling despite the tears that threatened to spill. I've never seen anything, she whispered. Show me. He nodded, throttling the ship forward, stars stretching into bright lines as they jumped to hyperspace. In the silence of the cockpit, Soraya leaned against Draven's shoulder, eyes on the glow of the console screens, the endless horizon ahead. For the first time in her life, the future was hers to choose. And beside her, Draven watched the stars, his hand brushing against hers, the two of them breathing together in the quiet, the darkness behind them, the unknown wide open before them. The nightmare was over. The hunt was done, and in the cold, bright scatter of starlight, they began again, free. Days passed quiet and strange. The hum of the freighter became a steady heartbeat in the background of their new life. The jump into the Rylus system brought them to the edge of a green and gold planet, its rings shimmering like soft light on water. From orbit, Soraya watched the thin curls of cloud swirl over sprawling forests and blue oceans, her breath catching in her chest at the sight of so much open sky. They landed on a small outpost tucked into a coastal ridge. It wasn't much, just a cluster of metal prefabs and landing pads, old power conduits humming beneath rust-stained walkways. But it was safe. No syndicate patrols. No alarms. No voices on the comm whispering threats in the dark. The third morning, Soraya woke to sunlight pouring through the freighter's cracked viewport. She blinked, the warmth against her skin almost unreal after so many nights in cold cargo holds and dim auction cells. She rolled on her side, brushing pale hair from her face. Draven lay beside her on the small cot they'd pushed against the bulkhead, his breathing even and slow. His scarred face was relaxed in sleep, the lines around his eyes soft, one hand resting against her hip. She studied him quietly, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, the tiny twitch in his fingers like he was gripping the handle of a weapon even in his dreams. But there was no tension in his shoulders, no tightness in his jaw. He looked human here, vulnerable, not the scarred soldier who had torn her from Kale's cage. Soraya sat up, feet brushing the cold floor, wincing at the faint ache still lingering in her ribs. The bruises were almost gone now, fading to yellow and pale purple. The mark on her throat where Kale had gripped her was just a faint red line. She stepped into the small galley, pouring a tin cup of heated water, steam rising against her face. The scent was metallic, faintly bitter, but clean. She watched sunlight flicker across the floor as the planet rose in the viewport, painting the walls in pale gold. When Draven stirred, she turned to watch him, voice soft. "You're awake," she said. He groaned, rubbing at his eyes with the heel of his hand. "How long was I out?" "Almost 8 hours," she said. "You needed it." He grunted, pushing himself up to sit. His hair stuck up in uneven tufts, jaw dark with stubble. She smiled faintly at the sight, something soft and warm blooming in her chest. "What?" he asked, blinking blearily. "Nothing," she said, lips twitching. "You just look human." He snorted, running a hand through his hair. "That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me in years," he muttered. She laughed, the sound small but real, surprising even herself. Draven froze, eyes softening as he listened. He reached out, tugging gently on her wrist until she stepped close enough for him to bury his face against her stomach. "Keep laughing," he murmured. "I want to hear it again." Soraya rested her hand on his head, fingers threading through the coarse strands of his hair. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Then we'll figure it out," he said. Later, they walked together across the dusty outpost landing pad. Draven carried a small crate on one shoulder, filled with fresh rations and spare power cells. Soraya kept close, eyes scanning the small market stalls where traders bartered quietly for scrap and tools. Nobody looked twice at them. Nobody recognized the faint scars on Soraya's wrists or the pale line on Draven's jaw. Here, there were just 2 more tired travelers in a corner of space the Syndicate had forgotten. They passed a stall selling small, bright cloth scraps, hand-dyed in greens and blues. Soraya paused, fingers brushing across the fabric. Draven stopped beside her, eyebrow raised. "You want one?" he asked. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "I don't know what I'd do with it," she said. "Wrap it in your hair," Draven said, voice quiet. "You used to wear it up, didn't you?" She blinked, surprised. "You notice things?" she murmured. "I notice you," he said simply. She picked out a soft green strip of cloth, pressing it into Draven's palm with a small smile. He paid the trader, tucking the fabric into his belt. Back on the freighter, they sat side by side on the lowered ramp, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The sky shifted from bright gold to deep pink, streaked with thin wisps of cloud. Soraya leaned into Draven's side, resting her head on his shoulder. She felt his heartbeat under her cheek, steady and slow, not the quick, tense rhythm she'd memorized in gunfights and dark halls. Here, he breathed easy. Here, he was just Draven, not a weapon or a fugitive. I don't know how to be free, Soraya whispered, the words raw and thin. Draven was quiet for a long moment. Then he pressed a kiss to her hair, voice low. Neither do I, he said. But we've got time to learn. She swallowed, closing her eyes. Promise me we won't run again, she said. He nodded, arms tightening around her. I promise, he said. They sat together in the fading light, the air cooling as the sun fell below the horizon. The stars blinked into existence overhead, distant and bright. Soraya watched them, feeling the tight coil of fear in her chest loosen another notch. Kale was gone. The Syndicate would keep hunting, but here, on this forgotten edge of the galaxy, they had space to breathe, to build, to choose. For the first time in her life, Soraya felt the future was hers. Not owned, not chained, not controlled. Hers. She turned to Draven, brushing her lips against his jaw, feeling the rough scrape of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. He tilted his head, kissing her back, slow and gentle, no demand in the touch. Just quiet want, quiet promise. When they broke apart, Soraya breathed deep, staring up at the stars. We're free, she whispered. Draven nodded, his voice low and sure. Yeah, he said. We are. And as the wind rustled across the landing pad, stirring the green fabric tucked in his belt, Soraya let herself believe it. They were free, and tomorrow would be theirs.